Там пожар был, я его тушил, пожар. Вон там все, блядь. Вот оттуда дрон и прилетел, блядь, пробил нахер.
Week 10 of the Strait of Hormuz and U.S. blockade. Everything went black. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So we're going to do something a little different this week because we're getting a little bit in a rut here with week 10 because there's a lot happening, but at the same time, it's almost like Groundhog Day, which we did last week, that the same thing's happening. What I want to do today is focus on the plight of the merchant mariners on board the ships and really highlight what's happening to them. That video you saw there was video I obtained from a Ukrainian site for crews on merchant ships. Specifically, that is an account of what happened on board the CMA CGM San Antonio, a container ship that tried to run the Strait of Hormuz this past week. We're going to look at that and a series of other stories from this past week. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. First, we got this news coming out from Iran's news agency that Iran's proposal to the U.S. to end a war asks for the following: ending the blockade, this is the U.S. blockade, freedom for Iran to export oil, a ceasefire in Lebanon, which would have to be agreed to by Israel, removing U.S. sanctions, Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz, and unfreezing Iranian assets. Does anybody want to take a guess out in the audience of what President Trump's response was to this? Anybody? Bueller? If you said no, you were correct. I have just read the response from Iran's so-called representatives. I don't like it. Totally unacceptable. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. I never understand the attention to this matter comment. I just don't. But no, that's not going to happen. In my opinion, my humble opinion as an observer of global shipping, if you give Iran control of the Strait of Hormuz, I know there's a lot of other issues on there, but if you give Iran control of the Strait of Hormuz, that's going to cause endless problems for the future. All right, first off, let's take a look at the data we have from this past week, and then take a look at some of the issues facing merchant mariners out in the Persian Gulf. So here we have the latest report from the Joint Maritime Information Center. Again, I'll have a link to all their advisories in the show notes for you. Obviously, the Strait of Hormuz remains significantly reduced with multiple security-related incidents reported in the last 72 hours. The piracy threat is still severe off the coast of Somalia, and they're listing Arabian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, Gulf of Oman, Arabian Sea, all as critical areas, with the Somalis is severe. Other areas in moderate, the Bab el-Mandeb, Cheers, Gulf of Aden, Southern Red Sea, Northern Red Sea, Suez Canal, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, if we look at the traffic trends over the past week, JITMIC has their numbers, and I'm going to caveat this as I do every week. JITMIC just looks at those ships that have their AIS on. So what we see here is on 3 May, a grand total of 6 ships. On 4 May, we see a total of 5 ships. On 5 May, 2 ships. And then for 6th, 7th, and 8 May, 0 ships coming through. And then on 9 May, just 1 ship heading eastbound. Eastbound would be out of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that data doesn't gel up with some of the other issues we're seeing, which are ships running through the strait dark. In other words, not broadcasting their AIS. This is the transponder that you see on apps like Marine Traffic. So if we come over to Windward AI's dashboard, we've got 4 things on what they're calling their bluff, the bottom line up front. Number 1, IRGC swarm activity across Hormuz. High-speed craft observed heading north after departing the Omani Peninsula on EO imagery. 1 inbound bulk carrier transited the strait flanked by high-speed craft formations, suggesting an active escort. We're going to show you that. Karg Island oil spill. So we had reports of an oil spill at Karg Island, and right now we're not seeing any ships loading. That could be one of 2 things. 1, it could be an accident at Karg Island. A lot of the facilities there, probably there are mechanical issues in place. A lot of the tankers have mechanical issues. Or it could be sabotage too in the areas. We just don't know. What we do know is that Karg Island has a report of slicks. 1 plume now sits 29.4 kilometers from Karg, and another one approximately 25 kilometers west of Brashear on a 12-day trajectory toward the UAE coast. The slick has split into two distinct clusters. Then we have this report on an inbound very large crude carrier. One VLCC observed transiting Hormuz inbound via the southern corridor with a visible trail astern, raising hull condition questions. 5 additional inbound vessels, 2 VLCCs, 2 bulk carriers, 2 oil tankers used the northern corridor. So we had a report of one ship, yet here we're talking about multiple ships coming in. The ship trailing is probably one that we saw attacked on the way out. We're going to talk about that vessel in a minute. And then number 4 here, Iranian tugs. 3 Iranian tugboats, including Karen 5. Okay, can I be clear? I don't know who names boats in Iran. I really don't. But naming a tugboat Karen, come on. I mean, you're just pulling our leg now, right? You're just having fun with us. They got a VLCC named Huge. I mean, there's no way whoever is naming these boats is not having fun at somebody's expense. Karen 5, along with others, are departing the Arabian Gulf for the first time, transiting east of the strait via the east route, likely en route to Bandar-e-Jask in support of an off-port tanker. This is the site where the U.S. has attacked Iranian tankers. We're going to break all that down for you. Again, this is Windward's Dashboard, a great source to go to get your kind of constant information. They keep track of ships, those showing AIS, and they're also monitoring dark vessels going through. All right, I want to talk about the plight of merchant mariners here, and after that we'll go do our recap for the week. So a couple of stories that really capture this for you. The first one actually doesn't deal with the Persian Gulf. It goes back to a tanker that was pursued by the United States during the Venezuela operation. This story over the Financial Times: the sailors who keep ghost tankers moving, working on an oil tanker under sanctions, was a job like any other until they ended up in the line of fire. So a great encapsulation of what it's like to work on a dark fleet tanker. Now, most of the crew didn't sign up to go work on the dark fleet. You don't go in a crewing office and say, I want to go work for the dark fleet. That's not what you do. These mariners, most of them wind up on these ships. They don't quite know. And then they're basically screwed. They're either screwed by getting paid or, in this case, pursued by the U.S. Coast Guard, specifically the Coast Guard cutter Monroe, that actually boarded the vessel down in the Caribbean and then asked the vessel to follow it, and instead took off across the Atlantic, heading up to Russia. There's a great story in there where they decided to reflag to Russia, but didn't have a Russian flag on board. So they cut up a Dutch flag, a Netherlands flag, and resewed it together to be a Russian flag. Gotta love sailors and their ingenuity. The ship eventually gets stopped up here between Iceland and Scotland, boarded and seized, and they talk about the fate of the crew on board. Crew was released except for the master, who evaded the Coast Guard cutter. He was arrested and was sent down to Puerto Rico, the jurisdiction for which this took place, for a trial and hearing for evading the U.S. Coast Guard. Remember, this ship was boarded because it was a stateless vessel, and under UNCLOS, the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, Article 110, Section 1D, stateless vessels can be boarded by navies, and that's exactly what happened. The next story comes from very early in the Persian Gulf conflict here, and this is a story about the MKD Viam. This was a ship that was struck really within the first days off the coast of Oman. The Guardian posted this: everything went black, then fire poured down, one man's terror on board a ship hit in the Iran war. So the article I'll have a link to here talks about the vessel. Now, this ship burning here is not the MKD Viam. This is actually the Skylight. This is one of the very first ships hit during the conflict. This was one hit up in the Strait of Hormuz, a tanker. This imagery shows you the fire on board MKD Viam after it was hit. This is the mariner who died on board, Dixit Solanki, a 32-year-old seafarer. Again, we don't tend to see those casualties in this conflict. In particular, we know many civilians have died in this conflict, including school children in Iran that was hit by the United States in error. But here we have a mariner on board a ship hit by the Iranians out in the Gulf of Oman. We're not exactly sure what hits this vessel. We believe it's a missile attack that hits it. It's a little far out for an uncrewed surface vessel. And here's the damage on board the ship. Here you see a steel door blown off the engine room control panel. When we look at what happened on CMA CGM San Antonio, you'll see a very similar situation. And here you can see the ship's hull where the missile breached the engine room. And again, engine rooms are crewed compartments on commercial vessels, so you get a lot of casualties down in those areas. Now, there's another story out there too, and I mentioned it the other day. This is a story from Reuters about trapped in Hormuz, about Indian sailors describing their nights of missiles, fear, and hunger. In this case, those mariners are actually working on Iranian vessels in and around the port of Bandar Abbas, and it deals with the issue of trying to get them off and all the hazards that are at play for those vessels. But what I want to really focus on and give you an insight on is this attack on the CMA CGM San Antonio. So this is the vessel in question. She is a 21-year-old container ship flagged in Malta, capable of carrying 2,824 TEUs or 20-foot equivalent units. So not a very large container ship. And we believe the ship was hit back here in the engine compartment, below the house structure here, the superstructure of the vessel, down low. And it seems to have been hit on the starboard side, so right about here, and you'll see why I say that when we look at the video. Now, according to the UK MTO on May 5th, this is report number 055-26, the ship was hit in the Strait of Hormuz in the vicinity of the coast of Oman. The vessel had reportedly been hit by an unknown projectile while transiting out of the strait. 4 of the crew have been injured and 1 crew member is severely injured. Later, 8 crew members were flown to the hospital. Okay, I want to give you what it's like on board a ship as much as I can, and this video and images you're about to see come from a website of Ukrainian merchant mariners. So the CMA CGM San Antonio is crewed by Ukrainian officers, Filipino, unlicensed, probably a crew of anywhere between 20 to 22, 23 people on board. Again, fairly small container ship trying to get out of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, she tried to come out after the U.S. escorted out their vessels. So San Antonio was running through that South Channel trying to get out. She had been stuck in the Persian Gulf since the start of the conflict. So just a couple of things about this video. The dialogue is in Ukrainian, and I do not speak Ukrainian. I have a hard enough time with English. What I have done is run this through some translators, about 3 different ones, and cleaned it up as best as I could. Now there's a translation underneath there you'll be able to see and read as we go along with this. If it's off, my apologies. I will have the uncut version of this with no translation on it, but just the pure video and dialogue at this link above. You can go ahead and take a look at it and not hear me yabber on, but I'll do it. And then down below me, there were some still photos. A note here. There is one that it's a little bit, it's not graphic, but it shows you a crew member that is injured. You can't identify him, but it does show you some injury. So just to be aware of that as we go on. All right.
Нашел телефоны. Вот, видишь, в каком состоянии телефоны.
So you're going to hear that alarm throughout this. You are in the main control room of the engine room. You're looking aft at this moment at the electrical board, all the breaker boards in the back of the compartment.
Планшет нашел. Да их, они уехали. Видишь, в каком состоянии все. Ёпта мать, блядь. Вот все, это стулья. Это стулья были целые, вот они.
So when the drones, missiles, we don't know exactly what hit here, came in, blew in the hatch.
Оттуда, вот эту дверь вынес.
So there was a door there, and where the missile or drones hit is against the bulkhead you're seeing straight ahead. I think that's the starboard side of the vessel, because typically the control rooms are facing forward. You don't ride backwards. You tend to ride forward.
И вон с того помещения это этот самый воркшоп, мастерская. Что такое? Там пожар был, я его тушил.
So obviously they had the fire on board, and you see that through the charred remains, especially on that side where the hatch blew in, where the door blew in. The chairs are burned. You saw the phone and the tablets all burned there.
Я его тушил, пожар. Вон там все, блядь. Вот оттуда дроны прилетел, блин, пробил нахер.
So he says drones flew in and beat the hell out of us. And again, that's the best translation I could find for that.
И вот оттуда вот пошла волна.
So when he says the wave came in, it's not a wave of water, it's a wave of explosion. It's a concussive force that came in. I think the door was shut between the main engine control room and out onto that upper deck above the engine room, which is their workshop, as he calls it. And that explosive force filled that compartment, and because of the concussion and the explosive force, it blew the hatch in.
Вот эту дверь выбила, вот она. Вот она здесь находится, вот она валяется, вот эта дверь. Вот ее вот так вот выбило сюда, внутрь. Вот. Здесь они сидели, вот за этим столом они сидели, филиппинцы.
So he's saying that the Filipinos, the unlicensed, 8 of them were sitting at that table when the explosion came. Now, they're kind of deep down inside the ship, so this is assumed to be a fairly safe compartment to be in.
8 человек. А мы сидели вот там, вот за тем.
So that's the main control board to the right here that you're seeing. And that's why I think you would be standing looking forward. So forward would be to your right, port side would be straight ahead, starboard behind you, and aft to the left. And to the left would be your breaker boxes, your power distribution system. The main control board controls all the machinery on the ship, the main diesel engine, the ship service diesel generators, all the other machinery on the ship.
Столом. Вот, я сидел.
And you see the crew members
Вот,
below
и все
there,
обугленное, все обугленное. Вот тут просто стена огня была. Я сидел вот за этим стулом, вот за этим
So the person taking the camera or taking the image here is showing you where they were. They were on the far side of the compartment. You see the damage was nowhere near as severe as it was toward the other side.
Компьютером, который сейчас перевернут. Старший механик сидел вот здесь вот. Вот, здесь Серега сидел, он даже обугленный уже, стул уже даже.
I think he's comparing the chair here on this side of the vessel versus the one on the other side. Talks about the chief engineer being there and somebody named Sergoya sitting there.
Ручки. Вот. Ну вот так вот у нас сейчас все выглядит.
Those are the main power distribution panels. You can see the overhead was blown apart.
Примерно так. Вот. Серега тоже ему голову там, волосы спалило. Ну так вроде ничего, нормально. Здесь. Это вот тут у нас все вот так вот. Огонь шел вот оттуда. Вот оттуда. Вот она дверь валяется. Вот она дверь. Кусок железа. Это дверь бывшая. Вот та, которая нет уже. Вот. И вот оно вот оттуда вот пошло вот так вот сюда, загнуло, блин. Ну и дошло и до нас. Ну, естественно, там такая там просто жесть была.
Just absolute hell. I mean, that kind of summarizes it right there, I think.
Вот здесь Стармеха, который здесь сидел, его опалило. Серегу тоже опалило. Славу тоже опалило. А я как-то так вот получилось. Место было самое, так сказать, безопасное.
So he talks about 3 other people that got burned on that area, and amazingly he came out okay.
Вот она вторая дверь, тоже вынесла ее к чертям собачьим. Вот она. Вынесла ее вон туда, внутрь. Это взрывной, все это взрывной волной. То есть она прошла оттуда, вот так вот и сюда. То есть ее вот туда, вот это все это вынесло. Ну вот как бы вот так вот это все теперь выглядит. Вот. Да. Жопа, конечно.
So this is the upper area above the main engine room.
Более или менее, вон только дверь. Стерингир более или менее. А здесь вот она, вот эту дверь тоже вынесла. Вот она валяется. Это вот. Уже он висит, этот доводчик. Вот она, дверь валяется.
So that's the other door. And that's above the main engine there, which you'll see to the right.
В этом самом. До сих пор что-то течет.
That right there is the main engine for the ship.
Ну, это я, видать, налил столько, что до сих пор течет. Вот. Ну и как бы вот все вот так вот. А Что там течет?
He's hearing some water flowing, which could be from a pipe or water coming in from the side. It's not exactly clear. So it's not a great video in many ways. And again, I'm not sure everyone who films everything does it in portrait style. They don't do it in landscape. Someday we'll get a camera or a phone that automatically changes everything for us. But that gives you a graphical view of what the mariners are facing out there. 8 wounded on board CMA CGM San Antonio trying to get out. It's just a very tough situation for the merchant mariners out there. So as we do every week, we're going to recap the major stories. Now, I did 3 videos this week specifically on events that have happened, talked about the transit of the U.S. ships out. We talked about the attack. Actually, that second one there has the CMA CGM San Antonio right there in the crosshairs. And then the other one was on the U.S. attack on tankers. So I'll have the link to all 3 of those videos. All right, let's go ahead and recap what we have for this week. So first off, on May 3rd, Trump says U.S. to start guiding trapped ships through Hormuz. This is Project Freedom, which we've discussed in a lot of detail here. May 4th, Qatar extends force majeure on LNG supply through mid-June. This means force of nature, act of God. Basically, they cannot transport. Although we will see that Qatar gets a liquefied natural gas carrier actually out through the Strait of Hormuz. That ship that went out on May 9th was one of their LNG carriers. Iran says it turned back U.S. warships from Strait of Hormuz. U.S. officials deny missile strike. Now, there's a lot of OSINT, open source intelligence out there about what happened, what did not happen. I will say this real quick. I talked about in one of my videos, specifically the one on the U.S. ship transit and then on tanker season, how many destroyers went in. And one of the interesting things is when the destroyers came out, there were 3 of them. The U.S. talked about 2 going in, Truxtun and Mason, and then 3 coming out, the Truxtun, the Mason, and the Perlotta. And I said that maybe Rafael Perlotta went in and to escort those 2 out. Well, now it appears that all 3 went in together. So this was posted on X by Pan Tony, a Polish OSINT, open source intelligence guy, and he posted this. I managed to confirm that 3 American destroyers did indeed sail through the Strait of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf, only to flee back out of it just a few days later. He's got a commentary with it. So he was able to get a good graphical image here of them. The yellow line represents that new Persian Gulf Strait Authority, the PGSA, the toughest, meanest professional golf association in the world is the PGSA. Here is the orange line. That is the channel that's acknowledged by the United States. This is the one they're trying to use, that southern channel. This is the area that's supposedly mined here in the center part. That's where the normal strait is. And then the 2 lanes that the Iranians are using. This is him catching those 3 destroyers coming in. And then later on, he caught them inside the Persian Gulf. So the Iranians didn't turn them back, although some other destroyers may have been with them and they turned around. But definitely we know at least 2, if not all 3 of the American destroyers got into the Gulf Coast. The U.S. confirmed 3 of them came out. We then have this story. U.S. secures first U.S. flagships through Hormuz as Iran warns of attack. This is the motor vessels Alliance Fairfax and the tanker CS Anthem that came out. On May 4th, China orders firms to defy U.S. sanctions in escalation over Iran oil trade. We saw the U.S. levy sanctions against several Chinese companies if they were doing business with Iran. This is an effort to try to cut off Iran's ability to offload oil to China. China is basically sticking this in the face. A lot going on with this because the Iranian foreign minister was in Beijing, and now the United States President Trump is going to Beijing to go meet with Chairman Xi and to meet with him. So there's going to be a lot going on with China regarding Iran here. May 4th, explosion hits ship as Trump Hormuz push meets reality. A South Korean ship was hit by an explosion in the Strait of Hormuz on Monday, and Iranian drones caused a fire at a UAE oil port. This is HMM Namu, the vessel in question that was attacked. Now, the South Koreans have released more photos of this. This actually shows you the damage. This has all the markings of a uncrewed surface vessel. We've seen these vessels used before. They like to get them under the stern of the ship because for a couple of reasons. Number one, when you explode these vessels, the force of the explosion is blown up into the ship. Now, I know some people are going to look at this and say, well, that's an internal explosion. Look at how the steel is bent out. The explosion goes into the ship, meets the inside confines of the vessel, then blows back out again. And that's typically what we see. This is a very standard pattern. We've seen this in the Red Sea. We've seen it in the Black Sea. And these are images that show you the damage internal to the vessel. Trump abruptly pauses Project Freedom Hormuz shipping operation as Iran talks advance. So we got a very quick end to Project Freedom, only a few days. This is why those U.S. destroyers come out. But the acknowledgement from the president was that this had to do with negotiations ongoing in Pakistan to pause this. Now, we also saw Iran execute a series of attacks on vessels, HMM Namu, and then, of course, CMA CGM San Antonio. U.S. Navy jet fires upon disabled Iranian tanker accused of violating Washington blockade. The ship in question is the Iranian tanker Hasna. This is the one that was strafed by the FA-18 off the Abraham Lincoln. 20-millimeter shells hit the vessel. The ship is located about 20 miles off the coast of Oman. Our good friends at Tanker Trackers actually identified the vessel. So there is a bit of a question here about where was the ship attacked. Now, initially they said the ship was heading toward Iranian ports, but we know some tankers have been trying to evade American blockade by running close in the territorial waters of nations. So we're not exactly sure where this ship specifically was targeted. We know it's off the coast of Oman now. Next, CMA CGM container ship confirmed attack. So this is the San Antonio, which we just looked at. So U.S. confirms Iranian attack on U.S. Navy destroyers in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, those three U.S. destroyers, Rafael Peralta, the Mason, and the Truxton, all came out and, according to reports, encountered a buttload of opposition on the way out. Now, some people are saying that this is a reconnaissance in force, that it was intended to get the Iranians to unmask their batteries so that the U.S. would know where they are, and that led to U.S. strikes against them. Absolutely plausible, I guess you can say that. It's also an issue that the U.S. ships were sent in to be the western anchor of a group of destroyers that were going to help cover vessels as they went in and out. But again, the Iranian strikes could have turned that off. Or again, as what happens here, the situation changes and now we have a plan. I don't even know what plan we're on now. Plan Q, I don't know, R. I'm not sure where we're at in the alphabet of plans right now. China confirms attack on oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz earlier this week. So we talked about this. This is the JV Innovation. We talked about this attack on the vessel, but there was also another attack. U.S. Navy disables 2 more Iranian tankers as Hormuz blockade enforcement intensifies. So did the video on this, talked about this, and raised the question about, okay, we're using F-18s to do this. Is it because we don't have enough coverage with this? I estimate we have about a baker's dozen of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers in the northern Arabian Sea. You've got to put 2 or 3 with each of the aircraft carriers. That takes 4 or 6 out. You just had 3 in the Persian Gulf, assuming 3 with each carrier. That gets you to 9. That leaves you 4 loose to enforce blockades. Plus, you've got to pull some back to be refueling, rearming. That doesn't give you a lot. Now, you do have 2 amphibious ready groups. You have 2 expeditionary support bases out there. So you do have assets out there that can spread out. But the F-18s seem to have struck these vessels at anchor, and the reason we say that is, again, because of some open source intelligence. This is at the port of Jask. Now, this is just east of the Strait of Hormuz, but well inside the blockade line set up by the United States. And what you see here is at least 4, if not 5 tankers that are showing indications of damage. Tom Bike caught this plume coming off the back end of one of the vessels. We think this is the Zvezda that was hit, and we saw the damage in the video the other day. Now, the U.S. has only acknowledged hitting 2 tankers, Zvezda and Sea Star 3, but by all indications, we're seeing multiple tankers hit there. This is one of those reasons we saw in that Windward report, those tugboats heading out of the Strait of Hormuz, Karen 5 and the others, heading there to provide assistance. This story, Iran detains Ocean Koi tanker apparently hauling Iranian oil. I have no idea about this one. This is the one that I don't understand. For the life of me, I cannot figure this out. By all accounts, this ship was hauling Iranian oil It's Chinese owned. It's a Hong Kong company, but this ship has been seized. And we know it's been seized because Tom Bike caught it up near Bandar Abbas with a batch of IRGC speedboats running around it. So I don't know what's going on with this one. This is the strangest one out there, and it makes no sense. Now, we had a story last week talking about the fact that the IRGC is operating independently because of the leadership decapitation. And one of the things we saw the Houthis doing for a lot of times was attacking ships with no real rhyme or reason. We just didn't know what the hell they were doing. And so this could be this, that one side doesn't know what the other side is doing. Trump's Iran strategy collides with Hormuz reality. It's a really good piece, and I'll have a link to this one in the show notes. It really breaks down the discussion here about what is going on. What's our strategy going to be? I have a concern that Trump is going to cut bait here and just run and really not deal with the Strait of Hormuz and just hand it over. We know, for example, that the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle and its battle group is in the Red Sea, just caught it refueling on satellite. The U.S. is sending a destroyer, HMS Dragon, to the region. Not exactly sure if this is going to be the end for the Strait of Hormuz if Trump really wants to just cut it. Now, again, one of the issues you have is the list of things that the Iranians want. Not sure he's going to agree to it or not. Finally, a Qatari LNG tanker sails through the Hormuz Strait. So we talked about the fact that we saw a vessel run through the strait the other day. Well, this is it. The Al Qaratiyata, my Arabic is going to be horrible here, but this is a Qatar LNG carrier, something we have not seen. This ship is able to get out. Looks like she's heading either to Pakistan or India for an offload, so we were able to see her come out. So a really confusing week this week in the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf, but I really wanted to highlight to you what it was like for the mariners on board. I think that's the most important takeaway I have from this week. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You give it a big thumbs up. You can hit that super thanks button down below or go over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber.